Here we go. Hello, everyone. This is Ben.
And Cammie.
And you are listening to the Everyone Belongs podcast. A podcast where it is our goal to engage in conversations and stories that help us all think beyond tribes and systems into a love that's big enough for us all. And you are joining us as we've been sharing our story for, I don't know how many episodes. We got sidetracked, and we're supposed to be sharing what we currently believe this week.
I think we're stalling.
But welcome to another episode of Postponing That Which I Don't Want to Do. First, a little bit of news. Guess what? We have 127 ratings for our podcast.
Wow.
Still averaging 5 stars. And some of you guys have asked, you've said, I don't know how to review it. And the problem could be the only place that I know of to actually review it is on iTunes. So if you don't have iTunes, I don't know what to tell you. For those of you that have reviewed it on iTunes, thank you.
Yes.
And we're going to start off with a little bit of revisiting last week's episode, which was probably our most fiery episode, I imagine, which is where we dissected, to put it, that's probably the nice way of putting it, a 2-star review that we got from someone that we know. And I have an update on that. The review has been deleted by the author, not by me.
Yeah, or me.
I would I would rather have the review up there. I kind of liked it.
Spices things up a bit.
Now, I think it's confusing for people why I enjoy that type of thing.
Yeah, probably.
But for me, when you've been through as much shit as we've been through in a spiritual world where people do not speak plainly about their disdain of you or your beliefs, let me tell you, when you actually come across a piece of writing that is so crystal clear, it is so nice to be told to your face-ish, I mean, over the internet, at least plainly, what you are being accused of. Because for years and years and years, we have not been able to get a hold of a straightforward answer from anyone. Stuff has been whispered about us behind our backs. Stuff is said behind closed doors. Nothing is published. There was a letter written about us that in the letter we are told it said not to share with us what is in the letter about why people shouldn't hang out with us, and we've never been confronted with these accusations to our face.
Yeah. We're not worth the trouble.
It's not that. I don't think.
But I do think it is that too. I mean, once you're not in the institution, you become less important.
That's for dang sure. But also, we're a threat.
Yeah.
I think they can tell. So anyways, to actually have a review, good thing I screenshot the hell out of that thing.
Why would they think we're a threat when we build a whole podcast out of one person's review?
Well, I was going to say there was another 2-star review this week, but you can sure as hell bet those people kept it fucking anonymous because they know what happens when 2-star reviews when they write. Actually, I don't care if it's anonymous or not, but they didn't even write an actual review. They just left the 2 stars,
Okay.
They didn't write out why, which seems like kind of a pussy way of dealing with it to me.
Yeah.
But either way, it feels good to have a 2-star review. I kind of liked having that there as a placeholder. But I do want to, like I said, this is not what this episode is about, but it is a good intro and transition. So I got a message from John PDX, who is the author of the 2-star review. That was his screen name. And he sent me a message when he deleted it, and it wasn't clear to me why he deleted it. There was not an apology. I mean, you can imagine why. My guess is it became a pain in his ass real quick. But in this message, I want to talk about this accusation that he made about our podcast, which is this phrase, maligning character, which actually makes me want to look up the word maligning and find out what it means. Because this is what we're being accused of, and it would be good to know. M-A-L-I-G
Like
N-I-N-G, maligning, meaning. Oh,
maligning.
Speak about someone in a spitefully critical manner. Oh, did we look this up last week? Maybe we did. Because then I feel like I was like, well, then I was like, what does spiteful mean?
Like you're trying to get back at them, right?
I don't know.
I think that's what that means.
So he's accusing us of being not just critical, but spitefully critical, which I think means we want harm to come to these people, maybe. I don't know.
I can tell you I'm not praying for them, but I don't necessarily praying blessings for them.
Do you pray for me?
No.
Oh, well, that shows
I'm
your
just saying.
prayer life could use some prayer, honestly.
Yeah.
Sounds like.
I
So if
guess.
you're out there, and if you're the praying type, you can pray for Cammie's prayer life that she would pray for me.
What the shit?
So what I want to talk about, though, like what this podcast has been about from my perspective, and I'm open to viewers being critical about this. Why not, you know? But this, any person that we've been critical about, which I think there's probably 2 or 3, maybe 4 people that I think come out looking less than heroes in our story. We'll say that. And the story I'm trying to tell is not about how these 4 people are villains and how they ought to be boycotted, how they're worse than me or you, or how they suck, or why they're dumb or mean or evil or anything like that. I actually don't even believe that. Which is why I think maligning character is a misaccusation, a misdiagnosis completely. But what I am claiming is that the people that we have talked about are a part of a system, and the system has some destructive aspects to it. And, by the way, if we didn't make this clear in the episodes that we've already recorded, we were also a part of that system for the majority of the years of our life. And once again, we were a part of this same system that had destructive aspects to it. Destructive aspects that were not really discussed or talked about. So this podcast, to me, is so much more about a system than it is about anyone's character. That's one of the things I've tried so hard that I don't think people understand, because people, you know, we address this in other comments. People are saying, how could you be involved in this when you're so intelligent? I'm like, first of all, did you not listen to our story? It has nothing to do with intelligence.
No.
But it doesn't have to do our character even being out of it. I don't think it even has to do with our character being out of it now. I don't think we took some sort of moral high ground. I think our story just kind of like led that way. We got kicked out of it. You know, we didn't even have the courage to leave or the wherewithal. So when I hear people in it, I care less about bringing those people down as I do about shining a light to the system. So I want to talk about another word, which is I was accused of maligning character, but what I feel like the 2-star review from last week written by John PDX, I feel like what it did and what oftentimes happens when people try and share their story like us is this fancy word called obfuscates. And I like actually had to look this up, but it came in my mind and I was like, that's the perfect word. And I was like, what does it mean? So you need to ask, what does it mean?
What does it mean?
I'll tell you, Cammie. To obfuscate something means to throw into shadow, to darken, or to make obscure. Now, and we dedicate a whole fucking episode to this, so I'm not going to redo it, but I think these words are helpful because they bring to purpose why we're here to begin with. Oftentimes, when people are damaged by the system, because there is no good data to actually discredit their story or what actually happened, what is done by the larger, safer, more powerful institution, in our case, a church or religious group, but it doesn't have to be. I think it could just as easily be the government or a chess club or whatever. We've heard this happening in like to witches, like witch organizations. We've heard about this happening in all sorts of religions that people have talked about to us as we've started to share our story. But when they can't actually debate you on the facts, they will try and darken or make obscure your story altogether. And that's what I feel like pissed me off so much about last week's review. But it was less about the review and more about obfuscation in general. That was just the clearest picture I've had, because most people, no offense, I think were more strategically minded in giving us a piece of written material. I think that was kind of like a big fuck up on his part, where he was like, whoops, like that didn't work out so well. But this is what this shows me.
Well, I think oftentimes this obfuscates is done behind closed doors with controllable people who are already being influenced by the system, and that's why with these other people, like the letter that went around that Stephen sent to people that we weren't supposed to find out about. I think that was his way of doing this like obfuscates, but he was trying to be strategic about it, because he knew, like, if we got a hold of that, like, you know, his intentions for it would not be as would it be what he wanted it to be as much. So,
and this is my observation, because I think there is this question that I would ask is, why discredit us in this 2-star review or just in general? And this review is just the tip of the iceberg of the type of discrediting that has gone around us. And the reason why this is important is, if you speak up against an organization, I think you should expect this. And I want people to understand the patterns, because if they don't, we're going to get into this, but if you don't understand the patterns, you're actually going to take it personally. But if you understand the patterns, I think it prevents you from taking it personally, which is actually really helpful for me. But the fact that John PDX, in case if you don't know PDX is Portland, Oregon.
Yeah.
So the fact that John PDX is on the other part of the country and talking shit about me over something that I've never done to him personally, it actually shows you how systematic this is. That what he's defending is a system of thought. I know for a fact he's not best buds with the people that we spoke out against. And I know from personal account, from having asked him and numerous people in our friend group, have I offended or done anything to you personally? This is what I've asked him numerous times. And he said no. That I've never done anything, well, it's not that I've never done anything, but I haven't done anything that hasn't been reconciled to him. So his review and this type of obfuscation is in response to a system. So my stance on this with relationships, and that's what today's topic is going to be about, is about relationships, is with a lot of these members of our previous community, I have asked them numerous times to their face if I have, and a lot of our last meetings were me saying, have I done anything to offend you or hurt you personally? Because if so, I am willing to listen and I'm willing to apologize. But, and here's the but, I am not willing to apologize for opting out of an optional system that I no longer want to be a part of. and speaking truth about it. And that's what I will not apologize for. So when he comes at me and says, his accusation is maligning character, which, like I said, I disagree with. I actually feel like it is our duty and our privilege to speak our truth about that system. And kind of my pledge, as we shared last week, is I want to use as few details as possible. I don't want to unnecessarily drag someone through the mud, but the very fact that our credibility is constantly being called out without any proof or data or search warrant or, legitimacy shows that we actually have a very sound, strong reason to have to provide data instead of vague allusions to things.
Yeah.
So I actually really do want to call this system out. Not because I think the system is bad or the system itself is wrong or that no one else should be involved in it. And like I said, I use the word system because I think this is bigger than a church, but our story was predominantly a church. But I've seen this in all sorts of systems and institutions. But I want to paint a clear picture for people of what when they sign up for a church, as an example, like, I think you kind of got to be okay with knowing that people get treated the way we got treated all the time. And that in a way, because I'm not trying to talk people out of it. It's just like, I'm not trying to talk people out of eating at McDonald's. Like, eat there, love it. Get the sweet and sour sauce or the fish fillet with extra sauce, extra pickles. That's what I used to do. But if you eat there, just be aware that animals are treated a certain way. And if you're okay with that, I'm okay with it. And that's kind of my message with people that are saying, what do you think about people that go to church? I'm like, great, do it. If it's helpful for you, I love that it's helpful for you. It was helpful for us for a long time.
But I think what you're saying is you want to shine a headlight. What do I say? A flashlight, yes, on the way that these systems do harm people. Because when you're in the system and when you're benefiting from the system, it's very hard to see that there are people that are being hurt by the same system that you're being benefited from.
Yes, that is such a confusing thing for people. And I think people love to say the system's either good or bad. It's so much easier to say that.
It's not black and white.
But it can be good for you. Just like McDonald's is good for you. You get a burger fast and cheap. But it's pretty bad for the cow.
Yeah.
And it might be bad for the environment. I don't know. And it's not a black... To me, even eating at McDonald's is not a black or white thing.
Yeah, and... it's kind of... Is it even a moral thing? Is it even a moral thing that we're eating at McDonald's? I don't know. That's kind of a question mark for me. Like, I guess it depends. Like, morals can be very subjective.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but I want to respect that. I want to respect each person's freedom to decide what are their morals. Like, what do they want to stand up for, and what are they okay with?
And morals change too.
Yes, right.
And I think people have the freedom to change. But so all this to say, I fully acknowledge that churches, and maybe I don't know if we didn't speak up enough about the positive benefits of them, but I've told people there's a lot of benefits to being in a cult. It's not black or white. Some of the best community we've ever experienced was in cult-like environments. And cult has a negative. It's like seen as it's seen as a moral issue, like automatically black or white as black. And I see it as a spectrum.
And I just think I see now how humans just operate in cult-like ways. And it kind of depends on where you're at with, like, what your needs are. Like, if a lot of people need cult-like ways, especially, you think about, like, teenagers, right, with their peer group and how strong peer pressure is. What is that? What is peer pressure? it's a little cultish, you know? Like one person is kind of the alpha and they're like, "Come on, let's do it." You know, everyone's like, "Okay."
You know what else is kind of like a fucking cult is the school system, the public school system.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like if you look at that, you know, we read those eight. I do not want to get into this, but the point is, we don't see cults as a black or white
Yeah, and like our
bad thing.
17-year-old, we're totally fine with her going to public school.
So we spent the first, let's just say, 35 years of our life in this system enjoying the benefits. And then we saw some of the negative side of it. And when we saw the negative side of it
Firsthand.
firsthand, we saw that there had been a negative side the entire time that we kind of had ignored.
Yeah.
And it kind of forced us to reframe the first 35 years of our life in some ways. Not in a way where we're like, fuck the church. We don't like it. But I felt like we now had eyes wide open and we couldn't enjoy it in the same way.
Yeah.
And my hope is in hearing our story, you know, and that's why we're using detail to show that this is like a credible story. I mean, that's like a fucking baseline journalistic behavior. I don't want to present faulty data. You get to decide what's best for you given the data and given the data of your own life and other people that you've seen in your life. Because this is not just us. These are patterns. So what fucking frustrates me is when certain people are making it their job to obfuscate, there's our word, to obfuscate a whole side of the story. And when you leave the institution, you are automatically, instead of being viewed as a more evolved person because you've been through what they've been through, they actually do the exact opposite. They say you know less than someone who's never been in here.
Or you're just damaged and that's why you're saying these things.
So I have this kind of cool phrase that came to me this week, which is I want to amplify the whisper. That's what our podcast is about. There's a lot of whispering out there. These types of stories, they exist all over the place. But a lot of people on our Facebook group are only feel comfortable sharing them in confidentiality because they've been hurt by people that have used power against them. A lot of people, including ourselves, felt crazy because you believed in something that you'd been taught was wrong your entire life. And so I want to use this platform just to share some of those stories and not to discount the other stories, but just add to them.
Yeah.
We believe that both of these stories can be true at the same time. The people that are having their life changed in the church and love Jesus and all this, great. That's wonderful. There's room for you. But you know what? There's also room for us. And we don't want to go give you fucking 2 stars just because you exist and leave us the fuck alone too. And let us share our story. You don't have to try and silence us, discredit us, bring us down. Like, we just want to sit on our little part of the globe and share our fucking story. Can we do that?
Maybe. We'll see.
Yeah, seriously. Okay, so let's. We had to we were supposed to share our supposed to as if it's some moral code that we're held accountable to by the podcast governance presbytery. We had attempted to share our current belief system, but like I said, I'm avoiding that like the plague for a number of reasons. And then this question came up that I feel like pertains to our topic today from Cliff. And this is what Cliff asks. Would you like to read it right there, Kimmy?
Yes. What would it take for these relationships to heal? Y'all have outlined some specific ways people have hurt you, which it sounds like is more than others have done for you in their past accusations. What would it take from them in order to gain your forgiveness? Or what could they do to make it right? Validation, confession, acknowledgement, apology, recompense. What does that mean?
Recompense is, I think, a way of paying back.
Okay. And in like manner, how might they answer that question if asked the same about you?
So this is a really fascinating question, and I'm really glad that Cliff asked it.
Yeah.
Because this has probably been the reason why it took us 3 years to tell our story, is answering these questions.
Yeah.
with the hope of reconciliation hanging over us. And I guess to share a little bit of context of why this is such a hot topic is because, as I shared in last week's episode, John PDX was at one point one of my closest friends. I've started 2 businesses with him. One that made more than $1 million a year for our family. I've traveled all over the country with him. He played for my blackjack team. We were friends in high school.
I went to youth group with him.
I stayed in his house. He stayed in my house. So then he writes a review, and we blast it to fucking smithereens in front of the whole world.
Fuck reconciliation.
Is reconciliation matter to us? Is it important?
Right.
How do we process that? That's the topic of the day. And I mean, let's share a little bit more context. Were you going to say something?
No.
A lot of the main players in our story have been family members, specifically Cammie's brother, who lives 3 miles away. That's my brother-in-law. That's our kid's uncle. That I have an equally, he's your fucking brother, so you have a history with him, to say the least.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, he used to pummel me with pillows when I went into his room.
Which is not...
Fun times. That should have been a sign, man.
Okay, but that's not... He's a pretty good brother, right? Like,
yeah,
ish.
No, I should say...
But you're joking.
I'm joking. He drove me around and shit, and he was nice.
He wasn't just the beat up type of brother.
No.
But this was a mentor of ours. He was a business partner of mine. Once again, numerous businesses over numerous years. Traveled the world with him. Spent family vacations. I mean, it's just like, okay, we were a pretty typical family, I thought, until a lot of this blew up. So this question of what does reconciliation look like? Is it possible? How do we even think about it? So I want to talk about this first question that Cliff asks. What would it take for them in order to gain your forgiveness?
Well, first of all, I don't really see them holding the keys to whether or not I forgive them. I mean, maybe he's asking a separate question here, like... Maybe there's a type of forgiveness that can only happen, or I don't know, if like you're like cool with the other person, or I don't know, but I don't really like. I do see forgiveness as a process. I don't see it as an overnight thing, and I also don't see it as it contingent on someone else. Like it's kind of like between you and you.
I mean, for me, what I think he's getting at is there's assumptions made behind the questions, I think, that I think I used to believe. Mm-hmm. This is a very gross analogy, so forgive me, but it's the only one I can think of right now. If you're a black person and you're asked the question, what would it take to forgive someone in the KKK that killed your puppy or something? I mean, I guess in that case, the puppy's dead, so it's like, well, maybe he could buy a new puppy, so maybe we need to do something more general. How would you forgive someone in the KKK that's just kind of like made fun of you for the last year or made your life miserable in a general way? And it's weird because in a way, there's almost nothing they can do. You know, their very presence and membership speaks to your annihilation and your hate or your less humanness.
I think the most powerful thing someone can do is change.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which has nothing to do with me personally.
Right. No, it doesn't.
It doesn't have to do with something they've taken from me or something they owe me. And that's what... You know, I used to hear Tim Keller talk a lot about forgiveness. Tim Keller was a virtual mentor of mine. He's a Christian Presbyterian pastor. And he talked about forgiveness as like forgiveness is a paying down of debt. And normally when you wrong me, you sin against me, I would make you pay for it. But forgiving someone is like, I'm going to pay for it. Well, it's kind of weird because while there have been like some infractions, like we've definitely been kind of like fucked a bit, it's not really the reason why the relationships don't exist. Yeah. We're not like, oh, you fucked us, so we're going to go away. Or you're mean to us, so we're going to be mean to you. Which is why, I don't know if you guys have listened to I don't even know what episode it was. I think it was called something spiritual abuse, where someone asks us if we consider what happened to us as spiritual abuse. That's a hard question for me to answer. Because on one hand, what I first initially shared is I don't think of it that way. I don't feel that way. I don't feel like anyone came after us to hit us or hurt us. It wasn't done consciously, and it was just done based out of this belief system. But on the same hand, if I'm honest, I actually do have to honestly say that I consider the actions that were done and the belief system that creates the actions to be abusive.
Yeah.
So the reason why I'm saying that is I view the people that are treating us a certain way as much as victims as we are. They're victims of the same system.
Yeah.
You know? So the reason why we're not in relationship with them, well, first of all, most of them are the one who made the initial choice to opt out of relationship. So I guess I want to speak to my understanding of John PDX, the person who wrote the review, was I hadn't really talked to him for a year or 2 or 3, seriously. And he followed a pattern of quite a few other people in our life that believed this story about us and kind of fell off. They stopped calling us. We stopped being of value to them or having a valid opinion that was equal to theirs. So at that point, we have to ask this question after 3 years. Are we going to wait for 4 years, 5 years, 6 years? Or are we going to move the fuck on? And for us, moving the fuck on meant being honest about our story with the same consistency that we had been honest with our story in every other area of our life and not holding back anymore. Because it kind of felt like our life was on pause for 3 years as long as we weren't sharing this. And that might sound weird to people, especially if you haven't experienced this, but our life was about sharing our story with a vlog, and it goes so much further than beyond the vlog. I mean, to me, this is feels like a personal calling, or like what I love doing is sharing stories about the deepest things that matter to me. And for 3 years, I felt like I was under a gag order and couldn't talk about this, a self-imposed gag order, because I was holding out for relationship and forgiveness.
And I just think you and I were just we were still healing and trying to figure shit out.
Totally agree. So then he asks, or what could they do to make it right? Validation, confession. I once again, I just don't really see it that way. I don't really feel wronged by
it. Just makes sense, right? It just makes total sense to me why they did what they did in that system, especially if you're trying to uphold a certain reputation. Like if you're a leader in that system, you're going to be even more harsh probably because you have reason to be. You need to uphold something and keep your status in the system. So yeah, what was the original thing? Could they do anything? What would they do to
make it right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, short of just changing.
I want to piggyback on what you just said, because you said it makes a lot of sense to you how they treat you. I would go a step further and say, if it doesn't make sense to you why these people have acted this way against us, you haven't been listening to our story. Because we went through painstaking detail and that's why we took fucking 7 episodes or 8 episodes to get there, for us to
Mm-hmm.
tell our backstory and share how we had done this to other people and how that made all the sense in the world to us.
Yeah.
So that when it was done to us, we knew exactly what was happening. The reason why we knew exactly what was happening is because we had been trained in thinking that way for 30 damn years.
Right.
It was our second nature ourselves.
Right.
And for the first time, we saw another way. But
Like, all these people, like, what they're doing to us, like, it's not conscious. Like, I don't think it like, when people do, like, really, really shitty stuff, for the most part, usually it's not like, usually they have to disconnect from themselves somewhat because I actually don't believe that humans are, like, evil, you know? So in order for them to do, like, shitty stuff, they have to be pretty disconnected from themselves, at least at times, to do those shitty things. And a lot of the disconnect is for them is they justify it. They're like, oh, it's for their good, and they need to hear the truth and the truth and love, you know, all these things. So you are taught to turn off like a certain part of your brain of openness and hearing the other person out and realizing like how they feel about this, and that's actually just as valid as what you feel about this.
And it's a very common thing to hear our story and want to hop on some sort of bandwagon and saying, oh, those assholes, that doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, just so you know, as long as you have that attitude, you will never be able to help someone in that situation.
It makes all the sense in the world. All the sense in the world. Like, if my brother right now decided to have a relationship with us and decided to and realized like he was being really shitty, there would have to be massive changes in what he believes. Massive. And I don't take that lightly. Like, I think that would be awesome, but at the same time, like, I get why that hasn't happened, and that may never happen.
So you just made a pretty freaking
Big leap.
massive jump, which is great, but I want to
Yeah.
transition to that because what you just said, which is actually what I also agree with, is that okay, so there's this forgiveness question, there's make it right, but in the Christian world, forgiveness and making it right, it was kind of just, it was a matter of saying those words, and then it was just viewed as like, oh, you're automatically reconciled. And for us, it's really not that simple anymore. I mean, what I've kind of had to believe is that the relationship we had with those people in that way will probably never be possible again in that way.
Yeah.
We had to have kind of a funeral of sorts for that relationship.
Yeah.
Now, and yes, we also got treated kind of shitty, but and this is what our therapist told us this one day, I'll never forget it, because I didn't even know what the hell he was talking about. But he said, you know, we're talking about how lonely we are and how we feel kind of crazy, and he said, it sounds like you have left your tribe, or you're finding a new tribe, or something like that. And I was like, what? I didn't know I was in a tribe. Like, what does that even mean? And
Yeah.
and I think that's we all have these tribes, you know, these social circles. Some of them are official, some of them aren't. Ours were actually unofficial, but they were the primary social group that we found our identity, our validation, our, like, what do you call it? Teamwork or resources or help from. And then one day it was gone. And then we had to ask this question, do we try and earn our way back in, or make them earn their way back in to ours? But we knew that they wouldn't do that, because the only way for that to happen is for them to leave their belief system. They're mandated to view us as less, man, I don't even know how to say it, because these words are never used when you're within the system, but we have less weight. All of our words do. We're viewed as kind of tainted goods. We're viewed as lost. We're viewed as confused. we're viewed as less smart now, less wise, less we're like more cowardly, like all these things.
And just like they're right and we're wrong, and there's no nuance, really.
So they would have to change, or we would have to go back to that way of thought. I think the only way that we could actually be in this same relationship is if we like said in their language, repent. We're like, that little phase we went through was just a phase. We were fucking stupid and on drugs, and Cammie was like on her period for a long time, and
Cammie was so gullible.
There was hormones, and we're back to normal now, and we just want to be let back in, guys, and we accept all the everything that you accuse us of. We accept, meaning that it wasn't really a systemic issue. It was really our issue. We were just bad people. And then I think maybe if they trusted us, they would we could have a relationship like we had.
They would take me over you because I'm the weak-minded woman.
That's true. And you've actually been told that. We're not making that shit up. But I actually want to share another perspective of friendship that I think, because all this forgiveness and make it right, I just don't feel that need to make it right or forgive anyone. I just don't have that pressure anymore. Yeah. And I want to share about the Appalachian Trail, okay? So most of you guys know that 2018, March 1, we set foot on our longest journey of our life. It was a 2,200-mile journey on the Appalachian Trail that we are currently writing a book about. By the way, this podcast is sponsored by 2,000 Miles Together, the book yet to be released. I just made that up to try and plug it.
On draft 7.
Yeah. So we start from the parking lot, and instantly our group is very unique, as you can imagine, because there's 8 of us. So we're not nimble. We can't hitchhike very easily. We can't, like other people, like they form what's called a tramily, where it's like a trail meets family, and they will hang out together and buy beer together and rent hotel rooms together and make all these plans and hitchhike and take 0 days in awesome towns, and we just couldn't do that. So I was like, dang it, we're stuck with our kids this whole time. We're not going to meet other cool people and make friends. But guess what? That started to change around, let's just say, mile 200 or 300. We're walking through the fucking snow and cold, and we start to notice that next to us, there's other people walking that we've now been seeing for 2 weeks now, 3 weeks. And we start to ask, well, I'm going to speak in first person because I think this is more my story. I was like, oh, these people are our friends. Maybe we'll walk the full 2,200 miles with these people. They're our tramily. But inevitably what would happen is we get to this point in town where people have a million reasons for taking a 0. Sometimes they're waiting for gear to come in that they mail ordered. Sometimes their foot hurts. Sometimes they have to go off to a wedding or a funeral. And with our group of 8, basically, when the weather was good and we could make miles, we had to make miles.
Yeah.
So inevitably what happened is these people that I would get emotionally attached to, sometimes an hour later, literally, sometimes a day later, I would have to say goodbye. Mm-hmm. And once again, I'd say, well, I guess we're going to be traveling alone.
You have no idea if you'll ever see them again.
Yeah. I mean, people are dropping like flies because it's harder than people thought, or life things happen, people get sick, whatever it is. And
or you're perpetually always just 30 miles behind someone.
And this is happening the rate at which this is happening, I think there's 5,000 people, maybe it's 3,000 to 5,000 people that start heading northbound from Georgia every year. Mm-hmm. And they're all going at different paces. So we're seeing not hundreds of people a day, but tens of people. Sometimes it's the same people. Sometimes it's different people. So I'm asking this question about every person, is this going to be our friend?
It's the book, Are You My Mother? It's are you my friend?
Totally. And I'm looking for friends. I want friends.
Mm-hmm. And it's fucking hard out there. So you're you look friendly.
Totally.
Can you hang out with us?
Plus there is a utilitarian value where
yes.
friends, people that you can count on, share resources. They share campsite information.
Yeah.
They share food. They share cigars. In Cammie's case.
Not many of those.
They share data on, trail magic and meals and all these things. Mm-hmm. So, there's a concrete utilitarian value. Anyways, we're hiking along, and really we're not making any friends that we're really sticking with. And we're having to say goodbye to everyone because we're going at different paces. They're going at different paces. People are dropping off. We come back and run a marathon and miss out on people. Anyways, the funniest thing happened. 5 months into our journey, which was
near the end.
Very near the end, 9 days before the end, we look up and we see these people that we're now traveling with. And their names were the Degenerates. That was their tramley name. 5 hikers. And we then realized that we had been traveling with these people. There was instances where we ran into them on day 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And we didn't remember because there were so many people then and everything was so new. But now we had been traveling together for 5 fucking months.
Yeah.
And we look at them and we're like, oh.
Yeah.
I guess these are our friends that we've been traveling with now for 5 months. Over 2,000 miles we had walked together.
Yeah.
But the reason why I'm bringing this up is in my previous way of viewing community, I was always trying to define, like, oh, are you my friend? Or we're believers. Like, we're together. Like, we're in this community group. We're in this thing. Like, we're friends. And I was so quick to put the label on it that I didn't really pay attention at all to who I was naturally traveling in life with. Everything was kind of forced.
Yeah.
Not necessarily in bad ways, but the definition preceded the actual travel. Now, what happened on the Appalachian Trail was because we were forced to not have the definition, that fell apart. We just paid attention, and after 2,000 miles, we looked at these people and were like, damn, we've just walked 2,000 miles with you, which meant there's this, I guess Aristotle, remember we just read this book where he said, like, your friends are the people that you've sweat a pound of salt with. These people, I guarantee you, we sweat a pound of salt with them. I mean, we had been over some of the best meals, the best beers. We spent our anniversary with them naked in their hotel room. Like this is, we had these moments, but they never came about because we set to have them. We came about because we were traveling the same journey together at the same pace.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was a very long way of saying this point, which is what we have come to accept is that a lot of the people in our previous life are traveling a different journey or a different pace. And let me tell you, when you're on the Appalachian Trail and you decide to take a 0 every time someone else is taking a 0 just because you want to stick together, it will kill you.
You got to learn how to let people go. You just got to let them go.
Because you're just sitting there tapping your finger in town.
Right.
And they're like recovering from their foot. And you're like, I could be walking right now, but I'm just sitting here on my ass and the weather is beautiful, but I'm trying to go at your pace. On some level, the best friends are the ones that you meet when you're going at your own pace and you look over and you realize they're going at their pace and you're traveling next to each other. And the reason why I bring this up, this has come up previously. I got this personal message from someone that is friends with people in this community. And this personal message said this, and I'm just reading the quote. Probably feels like little to no chance at this point, but I hope one day your families can be reconciled. And that felt so weird to me when he said that. Because I was like, in order for reconciliation to happen, our family would have to like devolve into the place we were at 3 years ago, which I would rather honestly probably die than be there. These other families would have to jump ship from their belief system.
Which I don't think I think that would be harmful to them because for whatever reason, they're not ready to do that, so.
They're obviously not ready. Otherwise, they probably would.
Right.
And we weren't ready.
No.
And I just remember when I got this message, I just remember feeling like, oh, for that person and in that world, there's no such thing as relationships that fall apart. Like, in other words, separation is always failure. And I remember thinking, we used to think this about every divorce that happened. Like, every divorce is a failure. Because God's plan is for people to stay married, and divorce was basically a sin. So it was a very simplistic way of saying the world. Or you should always
be in a relationship. And it's like, what the fuck does that mean? Like, I mean, I'm going to let that person exist. They're going to let me exist. Isn't that enough of a relationship? Like, for some people, like, it's okay. Like, we don't need to be besties.
So for us, the way that I've come to see this is actually because our belief system had such a hold in our mentality. When you're a part of these spiritual belief systems that basically take your entire identity, and I mean that very literally.
Yeah.
When I was in my Christian peak, I would say these phrases like, the only important thing about me is the gospel. That's what I would say. And I would say, my beliefs don't matter, God's beliefs matter, which is another way of saying my viewpoint of God's beliefs are the only thing that matter. In other words, if you have a different view of God, it's essentially saying we can't be friends. And I don't think this is what Christians realize. Yeah. Christians cannot be, like, legit Christians in terms of evangelical, like in this way, they cannot be truly friends with people outside that world. And they always wonder why they struggle to make relationships. I always did. I always wanted like a gay friend or a Muslim friend or something, like to kind of tack on my trophy.
Why don't they like me?
But I was like,
because you're an asshole.
Because your belief system dictates that they're less than you.
Yeah.
If you believe the most important thing about you is this belief, and that could be any belief on the planet, by the way. If the most important belief to me is that Starbucks is the best coffee shop in the world, I will only be able to be close friends with someone who thinks that.
And you see this in 3-year-olds, right? Like, you're like, my favorite color is blue. Well, mine's red, and then you like...
We're not friends.
And they like walk off because it's like, well, mine's red, and...
Does that actually happen?
Well, maybe not. That was maybe a bad analogy, but I do think like little kids... Well, but little kids have in their favor that they like forget shit like the next second. So
they're like, okay, we're friends again.
Really matter. But I do see that mentality of like, they only see... in blue, like blue is my color. I love blue,
totally. So, we had a very difficult choice to make when, first of all, we got excommunicated from this community, and we had this choice: do we try and earn our way back in, or do we pursue what we consider our own health, which we knew, even though we didn't want to say goodbye, we knew that meant we would no longer be included, which is, I don't think it's the exact same as saying goodbye, because actually really I think it's the people's choice just as much as ours. But that was signing the death warrant on the relationships as we knew them to be.
I think it was just accepting reality. Like, we're evolving and they're not in this way. So... to accept reality is we need to like separate and take our own path at this point.
And this is, like I said, some of these are gross analogies. I don't mean them to be. But if you take someone that's a member of the KKK, I'm not comparing the church to the KKK, but they are both institutions. And they convert from no longer wanting to be in the KKK. And this is the story of the movie, one of my favorite movies, American History X. Highly recommend. And as long as you don't mind seeing a guy's face curb stomped.
Just walk out in that part if you don't like that, like I do.
When you walk out, you cannot be friends. There's no forgiveness. There's no making it right. It's when you're in the KKK, that's one of those beliefs you have that's all-consuming in our culture. You can't be a casual KKK member.
It's like... that's when beliefs become oppressive, right? Like, not in the, like, violent way, like, with KKK, but, like, although in that way with them. But, like, when you hold a belief so strongly that it's the only belief that's out there that's valid, I think then you run the risk of oppressing people, at least in your mind. When you look at them, you're like, or you devalue them, maybe is a better word than oppress. I don't know.
So the irony is, like, even the most public scathing feedback we've gotten was from the review we read last week by John PDX. If this person was to accept our story and convert from what I consider very condescending and judgmental beliefs and perspectives about us, I there's no beef I have with them because my beef is with the system and the blind spots of the system. So like, and you guys, you know what's fascinating about this? Whatever, if I'm gonna talk shit about, in this case, John PDX or Cammy's brother, whoever it is, and they convert, and I'm like, no, you're still an asshole. Whatever lens I have to have on myself also, because that's where I came from, my past version of myself. And I have a lot of grace for my past version of myself. I don't talk shit about my past version of myself. I believe I was doing the best I could with what I had. And I actually believe that about every person out there. And I believe that about these people that are still in it. You know, I actually like feel more bad for them, just because like I know what it's like. I actually, and not bad as a whole. I don't think they're lesser people, but I think there is a lot of fear that and limitations that keep people in that system sometimes. And if they were to say like, hey, like I don't see the world that way anymore, and I've like changed, I'd be like, that's cool. Now,
Yeah.
I don't think we're necessarily going to be like best buds like we were just because 3 years have come and gone. And to me, it would be almost the equivalent of like starting over, like saying, okay, we're new people. You're new people. Do we have anything in common? Like, do we want to be friends moving forward? If so, like, cool. If not, like, no big. Like, I don't, once again, I'm not taking it personally that we don't fit in, you know, it'd almost be like if, like, I still hate using this KKK thing because I think people are gonna. I think it's easy to assume that I'm saying the church is like that. But in the movie American History X, when he converts in jail and he's no longer a KKK member and he sees his old beliefs as somewhat simplistic and archaic, he doesn't take personally that every single person in the KKK doesn't accept him anymore. He knows what he signs up for when he converts. I mean, it sucks. And I don't think people know this in the church, by the way. I think people think, oh, I can move on and be a Buddhist and people will still be my friends. That is a major misconception, I think.
There might be some Christians there's some Christians that would be fine with that. But at least the conservative, evangelical, fundamentalist structures, not so much.
Because your presence becomes threatening to the system itself, which is why I think this review was written about us, because I think our speaking threatens a system that John PDX is very much still a part of, which is weird when you think about it, because you can not even personally offend anyone, but the fact that you believe something that is offensive to their system, even if you're okay with it, you know, I'm not, and this is like, I guess this is what's weird to me, is the way I view it, I'm fine with seeing different truths. You know, he's pushing his thing about how cool the system is, and guess what? I've been there, and I think it is probably cool for a lot of people. So great, do it. I'm not stopping him. And like I said, it's important to realize I'm not trying to shut these people's ministries or websites or lives down. I just want to say, oh, hey, also there's this kind of story that isn't being told so much that has happened to a lot of people that it's not really that beneficial to ignore, because some of you might also end up there.
Right.
So in my mind, we're not competing. But in a way, you know, what makes it so challenging for us is historically, we put their truth above our own because we were trained to do so. And that's what people in that system naturally do. They're like, our truth is more valuable than yours. So I think that's why the justification of this very, very blatant obfuscation is happening, where they see, oh, our angles are better, they're more true, they're more loving or some shit. I don't know what the fuck is being said specifically, because like that review is so like, it's so off on so many ways. But I'm thankful for it, because I think it reflects a truth that we've heard from a lot of people and places, and that we've once believed ourselves. So what we're doing now is saying, okay, for the first time in our life, we're not putting our old truth above this truth. You know, I think the church has a truth, great. I think our stories are not less true. And the main thing I want to get at, because this is where it's really fucking, I guess we're getting a little off track, but to get back to Cliff's question about relationships, I don't see separation from these people as a failure, at least a failure on our part. I'm not going to own that. But I don't even see it as a failure necessarily on their part. I don't think they need to follow us into our belief system. I would like to not be fucking hunted and sabotaged, but I don't think they need to be our friends anymore. Yeah. It's just like the Appalachian Trail. Some people, they need to take a zero, and they need to stay in a town. And some people go faster, and some people go slower, and some people get off the trail and they take another trail. And we just need to be okay with that. Or if you're not, you're going to be constantly feeling guilty. And one thing I've come to see after the fact is that I don't think I realized how much social pressure we were under, but I know we would not be where we're at with our belief system if we had stayed friends with those people. And I'm really glad. I mean, our belief system has created so much more freedom for us now, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, that even though I care about those relationships and would have died for a lot of those people at certain points in my life, I am really glad. If I had to choose, I would choose my personal health over kind of a blind devotion or commitment, because I was taught that any type of separation was viewed as a failure. So I was like, almost, I think a lot of Christians are like, at least I was like obsessed with commitment. Like it almost becomes this thing, which is really weird when you think about it. Like I said, on the Appalachian Trail, if you commit to people in the wrong way, it's really bad for everyone. No one wins.
Yeah. I think that verse, I mean, this is getting into the weeds a little bit, but I think a lot of that, for me at least, came from believing the Bible and all the, like, these little things in it, right? Like that verse, it's like, if any of your brothers have anything against you before you go to the altar, then make sure you go to them. When, so then, like, I remember feeling, like, really obsessed with, oh, no, like, and fearful, like, oh, is that true for me or is that true for them? And it was so weighty. And now I'm just like, oh, well. I mean, yeah, sure, there's nice principles there, but it's not the fucking law. And then God's not going to, like, fucking strike me down if, like, I don't deal with some shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
That's and right. Then I have this little Instagram nugget I want to share with you guys, which is this quote that I guess is attributed to Jim Carrey, which is so weird that we're quoting Jim Carrey. But
it's not weird, though. That guy's fucking involved.
He is kind of nutso in a good way. But anyways, this is the quote. And it said, I came across this today, so it's kind of like, one of those things when Instagram speaks to you,
Yeah.
If their absence brings you peace, you didn't really lose them. I'm going to read that again.
Sure. I've heard that one.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
From Dumb and Dumber.
From Dumb and Dumber.
That's a Jim Carrey movie.
I know, but he spoke that on...
It's a joke.
Oh,
I was just making a Jim Carrey joke.
Yeah.
If their absence brings you peace, you didn't really lose them.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, you guys, this sounds like we're talking shit about our old friend group. I don't see it that way at all. I think there's a lot of people out there that if you unfollowed people on Instagram or Facebook or stopped meeting with the same obligatory group just because you have to, guess what? We're not in hunter-gatherer days anymore. You don't need to stay with the same tribe for the rest of your life to be a good person or to survive.
Peace is underrated and relationships are overrated.
And we have a lot more peace now as a result of saying goodbye to these relationships. And it was the hardest transition I ever went through. I felt like I was letting go of all my values. I think in a weird way, because we were forced to and did not have the choice, it was like a mixed blessing where, we had to do it. I don't know if I tell Cammy all the time, I don't think I would have had the courage to do it had we not been forced. But now that I'm where I am, I wouldn't go back for $1 million. And And once again, to use the Appalachian Trail analogy, this is not saying that people in my previous life are assholes. It means they're going at a different pace or heading a different direction, which is not a moral thing. So if I'm hiking with someone that's faster than me all the time, I will be miserable. Or if I'm hiking with someone that's slower than me all the time, just for the principle of it. Every once in a while, it'll be worth it. But a lot of times I've realized my meter was off in my commitment. I was willing to commit to almost anyone that called themselves a Christian. And I was hiking with a lot of folks that the only thing we had in common was that label.
So, hike your own hike.
Hike your own hike. Did we answer your question, Cliff? Probably not.
Well,
we did our own.
We at least addressed it.
Dude, and I had this goal of like making this one shorter, like under an hour, because the last one was like an hour and a half, but too bad for you guys. Okay, that's it. If you guys would like to be a part of the discussion that where we discuss these topics more in depth, there's two ways you can do that. One is you can leave a YouTube comment, but if you really, really want to discuss it, I highly recommend the Facebook discussion group now. It's the fastest growing Everyone Belongs podcast discussion group in the world right now.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
I was just making fun of churches say that all the time.
I'm playing along.
I can't tell with you sometimes if you're tracking with me or if you're not tracking at all.
What is it? The glazed eyes that's throwing you off?
I don't know. It is, what is it, 11 o'clock at night? So that group, the link is in the description of the YouTube video or the podcast show notes. Otherwise, I guess the only other thing I have to say is you can watch these on YouTube. You can listen to them on iTunes and all the other podcasting platforms. Our goal was 100 ratings. Let's go for 1,000. Just kidding. My goal was 100, and I got 100, and it's really great. And if you guys actually do want to listen more, this is manipulative, but it's not just manipulative. Because I was thinking this earlier today. I was like, you know how I shared that our goal is to amplify the whisper? That's what I love about some of these 5-star reviews is I feel like for people that are rating this and sharing it or making it more findable, I don't know if anyone's actually legit sharing it, but I think it's a way of sharing not just our story, but the types of stories that are on the Facebook discussion group and these stories that are less told by these institutions. It's a way of amplifying the whisper, and I appreciate that. I mean, we have put our entire life on the line to do this, not to sound too dramatic, but, you know, while for 3 years these people hadn't been talking about us, I kind of knew once we started telling our story, it's like, okay, if there was a shred of hope, there's really not anymore, is how I've had to plan my life. And I still consider it worth it because, frankly, I have to assume those people are hiking at their own pace and they're enjoying their life and they're doing what's best for them. And I'm not responsible for them. And we have met so many other people that are hiking at our pace. And they're telling us, man, I've been through the same thing and hearing your story gives me hope. So, I mean, you're always choosing someone, I think, you guys. And right now, we're choosing to hike with the people that we see around us, not some promised potential group of people that we have to act a certain way to be around. Wow.
All right.
Thanks.
Wrapping it up here, folks.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.
Peace.